She had this dream where her husband came back and sat down by her bed and said, I've been to the end of time and back. And you know what? I still love you. And for me, it's just like how beautiful that is. Like she carried that dream with her as she moved forward in life. Well, some of the things that we don't talk about with loss is the fact that some of the people who die, they were the ones that told us that we were good enough, right? That we were loved.
Yeah.
And how important these dreams are to continue to fulfill that mission where allowing that love still sits inside you. And this is a reminder of that. Even though if they're not physically present, they're still there and the love's still there. And these dreams can really, I think, help people embrace that.
Hi there, grief growers. I am so honored to be here with you this week to talk about a topic that is so close to my heart. If you have been growing alongside me for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, 2-time, soon to be 3-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is an online course and community that has helped dozens of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken and alone in their grief, and start building lives that they genuinely love from the ones loss forced them to live. In Life After Loss Academy, we do not exclusively talk about loss due to death, but also losses like divorce and breakup, major diagnosis, and every other loss or life transition that changes the way you exist in the world. Here on Grief Grower, we believe that grief is not something to get over, as society would have you think. It is something that we grow with and alongside for the rest of our lives, and that when we stop treating grief as a problem or an obstacle or something to get over, and instead approach grief as an invitation to live more deeply and feel connected to our memories and our loved ones who have died, that we get to live lives that are richer and, honestly, in my humble opinion, a little bit better for the wear, as opposed to worse for the wear. I don't know if that's a phrase. Better for the wear? I'm going to make it one. We will make it one right now. Today on the show, I am so thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Joshua Black. He is one of my personal friends, one of the first people in the grief space that I ever consumed media from. His podcast, Grief Dreams, was one of the very first things I listened to after my mother died. And we're going to be talking all about grief dreams. We are covering the 3 types of grief dreams, so you can see which type of grief dream you're having, how to have a grief dream or a dream of somebody or someone who died if you're longing to have one and have not had one yet, why dream books and dictionaries that are like published to the masses may not be helpful when it comes to interpreting your dreams, the lessons grief dreams can teach us and how we can carry them forward into waking life, and some of mine and Josh's favorite pop culture examples of dreaming about someone who died. Here is Josh's formal bio. Joshua Black, PhD, is a grief and bereavement researcher, speaker, educator, and host of the Grief Dreams podcast. Joshua holds a master's degree in psychology from Trent University and a PhD in psychology from Brock University. His research has focused on dreams and waking experience of the deceased, continuing bonds, bereavement during the COVID-19 pandemic, and bereavement in the context of homelessness. He is dedicated to raising awareness of those who are bereaved who are not being provided with the necessary bereavement support. Here's our conversation together. Josh, thank you so much for joining us here on Grief Grower today. I am so honored to be talking about the concept of grief dreams because I know for so many of my clients and students inside Life After Loss Academy, they talk about dreams where they're visited by a loved one or dreams where they're haunted by a loved one's final moments or wanting to have grief dreams but not being able to access them. So as like the world's foremost grief dreams expert, I would love to know first, why did you start studying grief dreams? Like, what's the story that led to that? And then if you could just define, like, what is a grief dream for everybody who's listening?
Yeah, so my journey really started, like I think many others in the field, where it was from a loss. Wasn't planning on doing research in this area or even talking about this subject. And so for me, it was after my father died when I was in undergrad, probably a year before graduating. I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, so that was kind of my pathway. And then he died, and it kind of changed everything. It changed like what I wanted to do moving forward, based on what I've been learning from just grieving in itself. And so when he died, my world like came apart in many ways, and I was feeling like a deep sadness and a deep
Yeah.
grief that I never experienced before, honestly. And so I didn't really know how to process that. And so I kind of, well, I didn't kind of, I definitely suppressed my emotions so I could get back to school and go back to work to, and sort of portray that I was doing okay. But inside, I would say the world was colorless. And so it was just black and gray. And I was just like really walking through the world for those first 3 months after he died. And then I wasn't asking for a dream. I didn't even know you could really have one. And then I had a dream of my father where I was able to say goodbye and tell him that I loved him. And it was such a beautiful dream. The energy of it was very peaceful and loving. He looked very light. Usually, when I saw him in waking life, he was very heavy, like with trauma, and he was dealing with alcohol issues. And so I always saw him as like this kind of like boulder walking around, like this
Yeah.
heaviness. But he was very light and happy and joyful in the dream. And just to see him. And when I woke up from that dream, the color was back into my life. Like I felt completely different. And it wasn't because I interpreted the dream. I think people need to understand that. The dream itself changed me. And I still don't fully understand like how to interpret that dream. All I know is it changed me, and I wouldn't be here without it. I'd probably maybe still be in that same spot based on where my trajectory was going. And so that dream was the first thing that allowed me to realize the impactfulness of a dream can have in someone's life. And then from there, I've had dreams with my father probably every 3 months after that, where I got to hang out with him, talk to him, and that was really part of my grieving journey and processing his loss. And so when I graduated, I still didn't, I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. I went back, I went to like apply. I got in for the interview, and then it just didn't feel right. And I was learning
Hmm.
at that time to trust my intuition. And if it didn't feel right, it didn't feel right. And there's no point like pushing it. And so I decided to just take time off to sort of see what do I want to do. And I started to volunteer at a hospice to do bereavement support. And what was interesting is life tends to provide you sometimes a pathway on where it kind of wants you to go. And so people were asking about dreams, which I never like told them about mine. I didn't tell a lot of people about mine actually when I first had mine. And so they were asking questions like, why am I not having a dream? What does this dream mean? Is it common to have these dreams? It's like what's normal, what's not normal. And like when I went to the research, I couldn't really find much for them. And so I was like, I don't really know. Like these are very interesting questions. I've only had mine. They're very positive. And so I was like, I wonder if I could go back to school. And like that question, like I thought about it and I was like, no, I didn't do any like there was like I don't want to do stats. I didn't do the research methods. Like I didn't want to do that. That wasn't my goal. But that thought kept like I guess haunting me. It's
Yeah.
not, in a way where it's like it wouldn't leave me alone. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Why don't I just try and see if I can even do it? If there's someone who would want to even supervise me. And after having that courage, and I found people along the way that were able to supervise me for my master's in psychology, and then my PhD in psychology. And it's like through that journey, I learned so much more than I ever knew when it came to this field. And I just love the topic now, and for so many reasons. But I think there's just so much beauty in dreams, even the negative ones, on being open to talk about it. Because some people are, when it comes to especially these negative dreams, they feel hopeless. They feel they can't control the dream itself, and so they're afraid to go into bed. And so there's a lot just by opening up conversation and realizing that there is a way to support people through these negative dreams. Like you don't actually have to suffer through these dreams. There's a lot of insights we can gain from that, and there's ways to reduce the distress and these dreams from even occurring. And so that's a beautiful thing for that. And then for the positive dreams is like these dreams are helping people in many ways throughout their life, not just through their grief of the death, but also just the grief of just being alive. There's so many changes from divorce, job loss, pandemic I've seen where people are having dreams of deceased that are helping them basically be the best version of themselves possible. And then at end of life, they're having these dreams to help them with the transition from life to death. And so these dreams are so unique that I'm just always fascinated when I hear the stories that people have with them, but also their impact and like how we are able to be, I think, as resilient as we are as humans through the trajectories of this life.
Yeah, I love how you speak about that because I think that dreams society often chalks them up to this like woo woo thing that we're not really supposed to understand, or it's just unique to you, or it's just nonsense that happens at nighttime, or it's a reflection of your mental health or mental state. And so to have dreams that are violent or traumatic or negative, as you say, like I'm reliving the death of my mother who died, for instance, reflects like you're not okay, something's wrong with you, you're broken. But I know for me, I have made a significant amount of waking life decisions based on things that happened in dreams. This is not necessarily a grief related one, but I actually recounted this to my therapist a couple of weeks ago. I was like, dreams mean a lot to me and they've always meant a lot to me. But I was in a job that was very soul sucking, working for somebody I have later learned has a narcissistic personality disorder and would apologize for terrible behavior by giving massive gifts to the office and then expecting to be praised for them. And I was in this job. I was like, I've never had a boss like this, but I really need the money and I'm afraid to quit because I don't have anything lined up for what's next. And I got pushed to like a breaking point. And I remember having this dream where this bright orange scorpion just crawled up my chest and stung me in the heart. And I woke up gasping. I was like, I have to get out of here. And it was one of these vivid, almost like a messenger of like, there's something else, but if you stay here, it will seriously hurt you if you do on some level. And so I'm like, it's not crazy or unheard of to change jobs, to ask a person out at a coffee shop, to grow something in your garden, to look for signs from a loved one based on what you see or what happens in a dream.
Yeah, I think that's so important to understand that, like, as much as like I study the, dreams with the deceased, there's a lot of dreams out there that, a lot of people can find guidance and almost sometimes the wake up call. I've had those dreams too, where I think
Mm-hmm.
everything's okay or I'm doing something and then I have this dream that really showcases that I'm not all right in the current position. I have to make a change. And it's just like it basically screams at you as if it's like a best friend saying, hey, like, wake up, like, like you need to
Yes.
change this, right? But I think it's for people in especially Western culture. There's not a lot of training or understanding on like how to look at one's dreams because we all have a different dream language, and so people can also be guided through other people or through like the internet, on what their dream means when it doesn't maybe actually mean that at all. But they're just like trying to look for some quick understanding on, what would this symbol may mean, where your symbol's different, like that dream may mean something that you had for someone else differently if they love
Yes.
scorpions, right? Like, or they,
Yes,
right?
a
Yeah.
scorpion is a blessing to one and a curse
Yeah,
to another.
that's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like it's just understanding that, it takes time to understand your own dream language. And so like to not jump to conclusions, but really like look at it. And I always like tell people, when I first started looking at dreams, and I still do, I really start with the emotion in the dream. Like, what is the emotion? What's coming up in that imagery for you? And then try to place it to an emotion in waking life from the day prior that you probably experienced. And then you'll have some kind of context of what this dream is directed towards, trying to either provide you guidance or even try to just digest some of those emotions. And because, when we're sleeping, we're also processing our emotions. And so it could just be you're processing some of that, whatever that is, that fear or pain or guilt or whatever that you've had in the waking life that you didn't get a chance to fully process. So it does that within the dream. And then when you wake up, you can sort of see, is it still there? And then you can actually like talk to your therapist or talk to other people to try to digest that a little bit more. And you see that even with grief dreams in general. Since I remember the original question was like, what are these? And so
What the hell's a
there's,
grief dream? Yeah.
yeah, so there's three different types. So the first one is more symbolic of one's grief, which is kind of like what we're talking about, where the deceased isn't in the imagery and there's no mention of the deceased. But a great example I like to use is someone's running by a mountain and the mountain collapses on them. And so it can
Mm.
really reflect the heaviness of waking life for them and how difficult it is to move forward and to even breathe. And then so you have, then there's another type of grief dream where the deceased isn't in the imagery, but people are talking about them. So I've seen a ton of dreams where it's like an angel or another character in the dream talking about the deceased in some way. Sometimes the characters are helping them to try to cope or just like acknowledging the loss. Other times it'd be an object in the dream that represents the deceased or in some way. It could be the hospital where they died at, it could be the graveyard or something like that. And then the last one is what most people like to talk about, is when the deceased is actually in the imagery. And they're usually physically present. There are times where it's just the voice. Maybe it's coming through a telephone. I've seen new ones
Mm.
where because like, when we used to talk on telephones. But now, like I see like the younger generation are having like Snapchats or Zooms or stuff like that, where like what they are, how they interact with someone, right? So it could be like an
Yes.
Instagram or whatever. So anyways, they're having those types of dreams rather than the telephone dreams because people don't use those corded telephones anymore, right? So it's very
That is
interesting
so
how,
cool. I would never think of that, but that's
yeah,
so cool.
yeah,
It's like, how'd you communicate with them in life? That's probably maybe how you're going to communicate with them in death is Snapchat or
that's
TikTok
right.
or
Yeah,
Instagram, whatever the hell you're on, social
yeah,
media. Oh
yeah.
my goodness, I never put that together. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I wanted to get to, I know you mentioned that like westernized or Eurocentric society has its own like definitions of dreams. I remember as a kid in the library seeing like dream dictionary books or like look up your symbol and what does it mean, and it's just like one paragraph about apples and one paragraph about rocks or one paragraph about, I don't know, pencils, and they all have different dream meanings or what have you. And I remember these were like big sellers, kind of like astrology books and
Yeah.
things like that in the 80s and 90s and early aughts. But I wonder what, if anything, you've uncovered in your research or dove into in your research that is more rooted in non American or non Eurocentric dream culture and interpretation. Because I feel like, and I'm not educated very much in this, but like the role of a dream interpreter or a dream guide may have been significant in other cultures that we don't necessarily appreciate here.
Oh, 1000%. Even there's even some people in the culture that are pretty good at doing that, but they found their own way through. But yeah, most of the time people are going towards these dream dictionaries, which we sort of just talked about how they're they're not really made for you to understand your dreams. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're just a selling point to because people are curious about their dreams. They feel they may have meaning. And so where can I go? Well, this is the only book that's really out there, right? Like so, and you think it's that simple, but no, like as I said, like everyone has their own dream language. So when you buy that book, you're not getting your own dream language. Now you're just confusing yourself because now is it when I dream, is it my symbol or is it their symbol that I'm dreaming
Mm-hmm.
of, right? So very confusing. And also I don't know many dreams I've had where it's just like a pencil and that's it. You know, like
Yeah.
or, like or an apple. Like it's always there's usually a story that goes along, and it's about for me. Not once you find that emotion, it's like how are these all playing a part in the story to provide you a language of what's going on. And so it takes time and it takes energy to try to figure that out on those symbols and how they interact. It's so important to get sort of the best understanding of what the dreams are, if they're trying to tell you or trying to digest in waking life. But yeah, a lot of other cultures really promote, like indigenous cultures is one of them, right? They really promote the power of dreams and the importance of them. And so I think when it comes to this topic in general, um, when it comes to the deceased, what's interesting is a lot of people can jump right to visitations, and
Yeah.
um, and a lot of people don't want to share that they've had dreams for a couple of reasons. One, if they're not spiritual, they don't want people telling them that it was a visitation. If it was like a positive dream, they don't want that. They just want it to be as beautiful as it is for them. They don't want to have that conversation with someone,
Sure.
right? Because a lot of
Yeah,
people just
like
jump
don't
to
make
it.
me believe in something I don't believe in just
No,
because I had a
yeah,
dream.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or some people have negative dreams they don't want to say because they don't want someone to say it's a visitation too. And so there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like confounding variables in why people I think don't share the dreams that they do have. They don't want other people to maybe feel that jealousy. They're also confused with what the meaning is for the dream, so not ready yet. I know certain cultures feel that if you're dreaming of the deceased, it means that they're still around, and that can be a negative thing. So they haven't
Yeah.
reincarnated, or they haven't moved on to like whatever the next part of the afterlife is. So they can like harm you. So it's uh, like a soul that's not settled in a way,
Yes.
right? And so it's just like understand there's so many different understandings and cultural beliefs that have been put on what these dreams can represent, helpful or harmful. And I'm continuing to learn like what these are for different people. And so even with Christians, like some people feel it's a devil in disguise, other people feel it's God allows it. And so like I don't think there's like one person that like or one group of people that have the same kind of understanding. I think we're all learning together what these dreams mean with our belief system and trying to figure out how to talk about them in the best way possible to provide to people with a sense of peace of understanding that dream, and also to normalize it, like how like your beliefs do matter in how we interpret a dream and sometimes the dream content. But overall, it's nice to sort of see I would say the Western research on just how common it is, and has really nothing to do with how spiritual you are. It's really a
Hmm.
human experience. I think that's the most fascinating thing, is that these things are coming because we're human, and I wouldn't doubt other animals that dream would also be dreaming of the deceased in their own way. Because one of the things we found, because we asked like why are some people dreaming of the deceased and other people aren't, because that is a cause for concern for a lot of people who feel that, oh, maybe the deceased doesn't love me anymore, maybe they didn't make it to the afterlife, or they didn't get
Hmm.
to heaven, or maybe they're mad at me, so they're holding back their visit. So there's different things where people can try to justify why they're not having one, right? And a lot of times it's just negative. So just
Yeah,
complicating their grief in many ways. And so what we found is that actually your dream recall was the most important predictor, and we replicated the research. So what it's saying is that people who dream in general more often are more likely to remember these types of dreams with the deceased, which makes a lot of sense. So the more you remember dreams, the more you're likely to remember one of these types of dreams, which also is saying that if you don't remember your dreams that often, you're probably still having dreams of the deceased. You're just not remembering them. And so
sure.
it helps people connect the dots. And like we're all made differently as humans, and sometimes we remember dreams, other times we don't. That's still an interesting aspect of just research. Is like why remembering certain dreams over others. And I always like to tell people too that as much as we want to remember the dreams, we're probably also dreaming of the deceased in a very negative context at times too. And so it may be best for one's grief if you're not, let's say, reliving their death, like
Hmm.
over and over again. And that could be very helpful as you move forward. But research says, like, as you move forward and if you value dreams, you're probably going to have, a positive dreams in the future. But I always sort of tell people, like, if you're concerned, ask other people around you, because they probably would have had a dream by now. Like if you've longed for a dream for, let's say, 6 months, a year, you haven't had one. I guarantee someone around you, if you ask if there's 10 people, one of them definitely, or five of them probably have had a dream of the deceased in some way that you can take as your own, to if you're worried about if they've crossed over or not, or if they're okay or not. And so like that's a very beautiful thing. And I've even heard other people have had dreams for other people. So they'll have a dream, like sometimes it's a daughter, the father died, has a dream for a message for the mother, which is very beautiful, which I like. It's very surprising to me how this all works. But when you ask the mother, has she dreamed? No. But the daughter dreamt almost for her with the message. And I've even heard strangers had dreams for other people, and they had the courage to basically approach them. But they knew them slightly, just enough to like be
Hmm.
able to send a message, but like they don't hang out or anything. And then it goes to show that's what the person was needing at that time, and they haven't had their own dream. So it's very interesting. And like what's going on, I don't know, in the sense of like
Yes.
how this is all possible. But all I can do is like give a validity to the fact that this is happening, and there's a lot of unknowns. But at the same time, we all make our own decision on how we interpret these dreams. But I think the biggest thing is to not be afraid of them. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Totally. And I cannot believe you just brought up having dreams on behalf of other people, because this just happened between my wife and I, like within the last month. And it's never happened to me before. I've never had a dream with that I can remember, of other people's dead people in them. And I never got to meet my in laws. Both of my wife's parents died before I came into her life, and my mom died before she came into my life. So we have this shared experience of parent loss. And it's one of the things that brought us together. But I remember waking up and there were a lot of random factors in this dream. Like there were a whole bunch of animals and we're pet sitting for someone, and then her brother was involved, and there was a lot of musicians all in the house together. But I remember in the dream being approached by both of her parents and hugging one and shaking the other's hand. And I woke up and I was crying, and I was like, for the first time, I was in the presence of your parents in a dream. Like it actually felt like they were there and talking to me, and I felt her dad shake my hand. And I was like, out of curiosity, what color was the shirt he was wearing the day he died? Because I remember I saw so many colors in this dream too, and it was yellow, and I was like, it was yellow. And so there was this really cool parallel of, holy crap, I think I met your parents as they wanted me to meet them when they wanted me to meet them. But in this way of like, You guys are so cool. We're glad you're together. We're okay. We're making music. We're spending time with animals, which was like some of their favorite things to do in life that I have learned from her. And so my brain was probably processing stories. She's told me about them, but I woke up and I was like, they want you to know they're okay and that they're happy for us and that they're still here. And every time we're listening to music or every time there's animals near us, which is 24/7 because we have our cat, they are also here. And we just both like immediately burst into tears, like first thing in the morning, which is a great way to start the day. But it was so neat. It was one of the first times that had ever happened. And I didn't know that you could dream on behalf of other people. And like, what a cool blessing that is. I will say I have the extraordinarily ability to like recall dreams. I've remembered my dreams for years and years and years and years. And so I have very vivid grief dreams. But I do want to segue into if people want to have a dream, a positive dream of their person who died or their pet who died, but they haven't had one yet, and they're kind of, there's almost like this desperation of, please come to me, please arrive. I want to see you. I want to know you're okay. What, if anything, can we do to prompt their presence at nighttime, which presumably when we're sleeping is a thing we don't have a lot of control over?
Right. I think there's two approaches there. So if someone's not dreaming at all of the deceased and wants a positive dream, so as I sort of talked about before, they're first like understand your recall frequency. And so for just dreaming in general, if you're not having a lot of dreams, it may take a while for you to have that dream experience that you're longing for. So please ask other people, like, and use that as your dream to help you reduce sort of some of the distress. One of the things I always love to do when people don't have dreams is ask them, what dream would you want to have if you could?
Yeah.
And it's really a beautiful thing because a lot of people want things, but they haven't really named what they wanted. And a lot of times, oh, just to see them. No, like explain it to me. Like, what would that look like? And so on my website, griefdreams.ca, I have a little like grief dream builder worksheet where you can like really understand what it means to like build a dream that you want and then create
Mm-hmm.
that and to sit with that. And some people have said by doing that exercise and like thinking of it before bed that they were able to have a dream of the deceased, which is kind of cool. I haven't done the research in that yet, but I think it just allows us to really look within a little bit more deeply on what kind of dream we want, because there's a billion different types of dreams you can have. And I've seen so many. And so like, what dream would you want to have? And I think that would be a really great exercise to just have and to think about before bed, as one sort of went to sleep, and sort of see how that sort of works for you. And there's ways to increase your dream recall if you want too. So if you value just all dreams, if you listen to this podcast, that's great. You're valuing dreams a little bit more. You write down your dreams that you have, that even without the deceased in it, just any dream that you have, you start writing
Yeah.
those down. What's interesting is research has found that your recall frequency will increase. So just by valuing dreams, you're telling your mind, I want to remember more of these, and then it will. Like, it's very fascinating. I remember,
Yes.
yeah, I remember like when I first started in my, where was it, my master's, I didn't know anything about that. And then I heard that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So let me try it. So I was having about I was remembering 2 to 3 dreams a week. And for people, like, you're dreaming for most of I would say 80% of your sleep in REM and non-REM. So there's a lot of dreams going on
Mm-hmm.
in you that you're just not remembering when you're waking up. And so when I started writing down my dreams more, I was having, within I think 3 months, I was having about 3 dreams a night I was remembering. And then
Wow.
which was getting tiresome because I was waking up, writing them down, and then trying to fall back to sleep. So
You're
it's
like, I now have another job. I have
yeah,
another
yeah.
full-time job at nighttime.
That's right. That's right. And so now I'm sleep deprived, trying to like do life. And so what I decided to do is it actually can go the opposite way too. So if you're having too many dreams, and you're writing down your dreams, don't write them down. Don't talk about them. Don't feel that like certain ones are important, and your frequency will go down in the sense of remembering it too. So it can go both ways. So that's probably the one approach. The other approach is you're having dreams, but they're negative dreams. Well, I think it's first understanding that that's what we would expect for someone who is grieving. So what we know just through Western research is that one of the theories is called the continuity hypothesis. So what that says is that dreams represent our waking life. So this could be in the sense of the things that we're processing, our emotions, what we've done during the day, all that sort of stuff. So it'd be more passive in the sense of what's going on in your life. Other times it can be more active, so it can actually help with problem solving in your life too. But it relates to your waking life. And so when we look at longitudinal research, what you find is as people's emotions, let's say, become more sad, people have more negative type dreams. If they become
Hmm.
happy or joyful, they'll have more positive dreams. So you can sort of see the relationship there. And then after trauma, what they find is that dreams are actually become more consistently negative. So you're going to have more consistent nightmares over that journey that you're dealing with that trauma. And so when we're grieving, we would experience some of that trauma and some of just the sadness in general. So we would actually expect people to have a lot of negative dreams as they're going through their grieving process. And so if you're having negative dreams of deceased, that's what would probably expect,
Yes.
so it's okay, right? So a lot of people tend to sort of say like, oh, that must be a visitation, they're distressed or something. And I'm like, well, first let's work through your grief and see if those dreams don't change, because that's one of the things that we have found is that as people work through their grief, those dreams will change into something more positive. And we find that what's really interesting about this research is that we found that it's actually more common to have these comforting dreams of the deceased than the negative dreams, which is very
Mm.
surprising. We didn't
Just
actually
in general, like
just in
across the
yeah,
board.
just in general,
Huh.
which is very fascinating to me because I honestly I thought people would have more negative dreams just based on the research. So in general, for people who have had a dream, and this was in like multiple studies, around 90% of people had a positive theme dream. And
I did
then
not expect that high of a percentage.
yeah,
That's incredible.
yeah. And then negative theme dream was around 40%. And so it's still pretty high. 40% for a lot of people. But what we're finding is that it usually happens in the beginning as you're trying to digest the loss, the trauma, the pain of everything. But if you're having a negative dream, it's very rare that you're just going to continue to have negative dreams. Like a lot of people are
Hmm.
having both negative and positives, like that 40%. Most of those people are also having positive dreams at the same time. So
Yeah,
it's just really understanding that negative dream could be just like telling you a little bit about where you are in your grieving process. And what I'm finding is a lot of people who are continuing to have these negative dreams, it is, let's say, trauma, let's say finding the body of the deceased, or
sure.
if you have like the what if questions, and so you have the guilt or regret, you're going to have dreams that kind of mimic that in some way. Sometimes the deceased will talk about it in some way to almost induce greater guilt or regret in you. Like they may blame you, but that's not, I wouldn't say the soul blaming you. Um, I would say it's you blaming you. And it's just a message that this is what's going on. And to be able to find a pathway to work through that and work with that, and find a new perspective on how you're thinking about that situation. And that's sort of the difficulty with like suicides and toxic drug overdoses that people have, right? Where it's like there's this sense of stigma that you're also being put on, even self stigma, that you're really taking in, but it also could be your environment, right? That's also causing these emotions to be taken on as if they're real. But I don't think they're real to the extent that you believe they are from other people, right? So other people will love to blame for if someone dies from something, suicide or a drug overdose or something like that. They love to sort of look at who to blame for that. And so I think it's just understanding that there's a lot going on within oneself, and these dreams can be a really great avenue to go talk to someone like yourself, Shelby, and just really process like what is that coming from, and how can we process this in a way so you can start actually, I would say, grieving in a way where you're not complicating your loss, when you can just honor the love that still exists. Um, and the hardness of that and how difficult that is, without adding on I could have saved them, or if I was just a better person, like XYZ, that that's just complicating you and stopping you from being able to actually honor them, I feel, in a way that's conducive to having more positive dreams, where these dreams would then honor that type of that side of you in some way.
Yeah.
It's really interesting though too, how some people will have the guilt and have the dreams where the deceased says it wasn't your fault. And so I'm not sure why certain people are having, like, they're both having guilt going to bed, but some people are having the dreams where the deceased is almost taking it away, where other times the deceased is almost inducing greater, like
Like piling
reinforcing,
on.
yeah,
Yeah.
reinforcing that, right? And that's kind of like what like
Interesting.
PTSD kind of is too. And people who have PTSD, they'll relive the trauma in a way, and it actually is one of the reasons why the trauma stays. Like the dream is
Hmm.
actually trying to process your grief and trauma, but when it's doing it, it's actually causing you to increase the trauma when you wake up. So you don't actually get out of the cycle. And so what's interesting just with PTSD, a little fun fact is that if you actually just work on the dreams, like and not the waking life symptoms, studies have shown that you can actually decrease the PTSD symptoms by around 50%. And like
Interesting.
some people will actually get out of the label of PTSD just by working through their dreams and reducing those because how strong they are at reinforcing one's trauma. And so if you're
Yes.
having those types of dreams, like it's important that you realize there are ways to actually work with them so you don't have to be reliving that every day.
Yeah, and I get a sense from a lot of this, a fair few of the students I work with inside Life After Loss Academy is like sleep is supposed to be an escape. And when it's not, or when it's not a source of rest or it's not a source of safety, it's like, well, now nowhere in the world is safe.
Yeah.
And no place in the world is safe, even my own bed, even the place where I used to find rest and respite. And so it makes a lot of sense that working through the emotions or the images that are coming up in dreams, just the dreams alone, not what you're thinking about in daily life, but just the dreams alone would reduce the sense of trauma of the world is not a safe place. The world is fundamentally unsafe. I really, really love that you brought that up. I think that's new information since the last time we spoke, probably about 6 years ago. And that's really, really cool to hear that, like, even dreams as offer their own sort of, not to get too woo about it, but like a portal to healing. If, like, even if you just go in through the doorway of dreams. And something else I was thinking about as you were speaking too, going back to like westernized Eurocentric world, capitalism, go back to work 3 days after somebody dies, and you don't even get those 3 days if it's not a family member, for instance, like a pet or a friend. A lot of times I think dreams and sleeping and our nights are the only times when grief really gets to come out or come up because so much of the rest of the day we're doing the grocery shopping, we're working, we're tending to children or other family members or pets or homes that we care for. And for a lot of people I talk to, it's like those 2 hours leading to going to bed and then being in bed are the only chances grief has to appear in our life. And so it makes sense that hell yeah, it would come out in dreams, sometimes wonderful and sometimes nightmarish.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, it's such a great thought because we're so busy, and we kind of, a lot of this our society kind of forces us to survive in many
Mm-hmm.
ways, and we've also been trained that avoidance is a key strategy of coping.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so these dreams can also help and remind us that grief isn't just because you're not feeling it in waking life doesn't mean you're not grieving, and I think that's like one of the myths that like there's an end point to grief. But like these dreams allow us to continue to feel and to process the stuff that's going on even though we're not recognizing it. And so I think a lot of dreams can do is help us with really our emotional awareness on what's actually going on inside us, not basically what we're showcasing or what we're saying is going on. There's so much being processed every day, and sometimes the anger or the outbursts or the anxiety that you may be having in waking life that you think is based on the boss or the driver in front of you is actually just your grief coming out sideways because you haven't acknowledged it. And so it's like if you're dreaming of this stuff, like, well, it's a good start to maybe start talking about it, see what's in there, and see like what it means to honor it and talk about grief in different ways. And that's why I kind of like dreams, because sometimes people have like a spiel when like people say, "Oh, how are you doing with your grief?" and they'll talk about it, and like they kind of like end. And so like there's like these certain questions that people can ask, and so they've asked it like so many times, and they've said the answer so many times, it becomes almost repetitive. But when you ask about other things, like their dreams, or if you do this worksheet, like what can come up, and it's just another tool you can use to sort of see where someone is within their grief, and talk about different avenues of the individual that they probably haven't talked about in a long time. And I love that aspect of that, and you probably have that too. It's just like asking the right questions can really bring out different sides of one's grief and where they are with that,
Mm.
and also the relationship that they continue to have and memories that they sort of had from the past. But just asking the right questions is like the key to unlocking new, I'd say, peace within oneself, because they're able to like get more out that they never thought that they could, right? Like without that question.
Yeah, like even the question of what's a grief dream you would like to have and describe it in great detail. I'm thinking almost like a grief dream Mad Libs of like me and blank would go to blank. Together we would blank, blank, and blank. By the end of the dream, we would blank. And then just like fill in your grief dreams Mad Libs. But
Yeah.
there, it says something entirely different about a person who wants to meet a loved one for a day at the theme park in a dream than it does for somebody who, one of my very favorite grief dreams of my mom was shrinking down to the size I was as a child and getting to nap behind her legs on the couch like I used to do when I was a very little kid. And we were getting ready for a party. And so we knew something wonderful was about to happen, but we got to take a nap before that. And it was one of my favorite grief dreams. But like getting to nap with my mom is a totally different energy than, ride a roller coaster together. But like what would be meaningful to one person is not the same thing that would be meaningful to another. So even asking that sort of question, if you're supporting a grieving person, or especially if you're grieving in a same household or in the same friend group as other people, these are really cool ways to open up conversation besides, how are you?
Yeah.
How are you doing? What's your grief been like? Like
Yeah.
those, it can have you dreamed of insert person or pet's name here, or what's a dream you would like to have of them, or I dreamed of them and here's what happened, is a really cool kind of sideways way to keep conversations about grief going when it seems like there can be nothing and everything to talk about.
Yeah, and it definitely it's a skill set. And as people ask more about people's dreams, I like honestly, the dream itself is just a doorway in to ask more questions. Like that's how I see
Yeah.
it. And like every dream is being created for its own reason. Like I don't know what the reason is, but like as you said, like what color was the t-shirt? People don't ask me like in my dream of my father, what was he wearing? Like people like, but I always
Mm.
ask people, what were they wearing? Because that has a key story of like who they were in waking life usually. Sometimes they're in all white, right? Like they're in heaven or whatever in the
Sure.
afterlife. But most of the time, they're in something that they wore in waking life, like either their favorite shirt or they're wearing like ball caps. And like then I get to ask about the ball caps. And like, oh, there's a collection. Oh, tell me more. What do you do with the ball caps? What do you ever wear? Like, it's like there's a lot of like questions you can then like just move on from, where it's like the dream just is a catalyst for further discussion on things you wouldn't think about, like the clothes they wore, like or like the places
Yes.
like you've been, right? Or even comments they say. Like some of the word choices are very interesting on like what the deceased says to the dreamer. And I always like some of it's like really wise stuff where I'm like, man, that is so cool. So like let's digest that a little bit and like talk about that in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to know, as we're wrapping up here, maybe if you could give some examples of the most interesting or profound grief dreams that you have personally had,
Mm.
and then maybe like one or two of the most profound or interesting from people that you've talked to in your research.
Well, for me, it was that first one was my father. Like after
Yeah.
that, like I don't think I've really had many that were like so profound in that way because when I look back at that dream of my father, I got to say goodbye. He died very suddenly, which is something I didn't really know I needed. And telling him that I loved him was, I remember sitting with that and thinking, that's fascinating. Like when was the last time I told them I loved them? Right? Like that's a question you
Mm.
can ask someone who has that dream, right? Like when was the last time you did, like in waking life, that you said I love you to your father? I would say when I was a child. Like
Yeah.
that's how long it was. So like I would say 20 years ago, like or 15 years ago was the last time I actually said those words to him. Like we would like maybe write, and we actually wouldn't write in a card. It was just like kind of like the guy thing where like he didn't say it, I didn't say it. It was just like like but we like felt that we cared about each other. But how important those words are, and I realized like that made such a huge impact as I moved forward once I made those connections, because I'm like I don't want to have someone else die and have to need a dream to say I love you. I'm like like
Mm.
what was, and so I really looked at myself like what was holding me back from saying that to my father or to, and then I looked around to my friends and like my siblings and my family, and I was like, oh, there's like some kind of insecurity in me that avoids it because of it maybe being not, maybe masculine. People make fun of me. I was like, well, that's kind of stupid. So I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, well, I get to decide what I want to do. And so like, let me say, and I remember saying it to my mom, and I was kind of uncomfortable, which is interesting in itself, but I still said it, and she just started crying. And I remember I was like, oh, mom, why are you crying? Didn't you know that I loved you? She's like, yeah, but like life is hard and it's nice to be reminded of
Mm.
that. And I said, oh, so it's not just for me to say it, it's also for people to hear it, how important that is. And so it kind of helped me along my journey of like really valuing your emotions and telling people how you feel. People aren't mind readers, and they also are going through a difficult journey and whatever it is. And so sometimes just by saying those positive things, and saying how, someone has made you feel can like make the world of difference to how someone sees themselves. And I think, that was probably the biggest thing, because it had such a huge momentum to how I sort of related to other people and how I related to emotions.
Wow.
But yeah, and that's why there's a lot of things you can like talk about with dreams where like you wouldn't like, oh yeah, it's a cool dream that helped you heal, but like it also helped with a lot of other things of just being human and valuing being human and those emotions that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I wonder if there's any dreams from people you've spoken to or that you've read about in the research that were like, holy cow, I didn't know that was
Oh
possible,
my
or
God.
that's a thing I haven't heard before.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, there's there's a lot. There's so many. So this one came from my aunt actually, because I asked her about her dreams, which is she's recently died. But one of the good conversations we had was just her husband died. It must have been like 30 some years ago when I was a kid, and she never got remarried. And anyway, so she had this dream where her husband came back and sat down by her bed and said, I've been to the end of time and back, and you know what? I still love you. And for me, it's just like how beautiful that is. And what's a beautiful reminder that someone is still loved, right? Like she carried that dream with her as she moved forward in life. And I think there's part of loss that some of the things that we don't talk about with loss is the fact that some of the people who die, uh, they were the ones that told us that we were good enough, right? We were loved,
Yeah.
and how important these dreams are to continue to fulfill that mission where allowing that love still sits inside you. And this is a reminder of that. Even though if they're not physically present, they're still there and the love's still there. And it's just like finding your way to it. And these dreams can really, I think, help people embrace that. I know a lot of people who say like this dream, whatever the dream it was, they'll go back to it anytime that they're needing that kind of boost or to remind themselves of that. They keep that so secure to their heart that the feeling that never goes away. They just have to remember that. So it's like almost stored differently than other dreams because it has like that peace and that love within it. So another dream that someone had where I always thought you needed to meet the person to have a dream of them, right? It seems reasonable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you would think so.
you won't think so.
Have some frame of reference for where the dream could go.
Yeah, right. Like you need a memory, so it's like more memory based. But it's not true. Like people can dream of people as you sort of had today, where you just never met them. And so this individual came on my podcast, and her father died when she was in womb, and so she never really had that father figure in her life. And then so she started dreaming of her father throughout her life, and she said that's how she actually managed to feel like she had a father. And one of the dreams she had was, my father tells me in the dream, I love you. I see you every day. You're so beautiful. And it was when she was, I think, in high school, she had that dream. And so it was just like, and she kept having these dreams. And so she maintained this like continuing bond with someone she's never met, but it was through her dreams that she sort of feels that she has this father like watching out for her and looking at her and giving her advice as a father would. If they're more or less alive, or they could, anyways. Not everyone
really cool.
has the same fathers. And then lastly, this was one Serena Dyer came on my podcast, and her stepson died from a substance use related death, and she had a lot of guilt. She felt that she could have done more to be nicer to him, to help him with his substance use. And so she was having a hard time with her grief. Anyway, so she had this dream. In the dream, Mason told me to hold his hands, and his energy was so joyful and funny. He then got very serious and told me that I needed to stop with the guilt. He told me that the guilt was soul sabotaging and pointless. He then told me to be careful with the thoughts I was choosing and the decisions I was making that were self-harming because, as he explained, the purpose of living is to love, and it must start with the self. He then laughed a little and unleashed my hands. And then when she woke up, she said that guilt was gone, and she knew the focus was about self-love and to really, understand that and work on that a little bit more. And I think a lot of us are continuing to work on that. I currently always am. I'm not perfect, and I have my doubts. And I think this is why those people, when they die, or pets that die, it crushes us in so many ways because now we're left alone to figure out how to love ourselves. And so these dreams, is a reminder, but it's not it's not the answer. The answer is for us to learn to love ourselves, right? And to, when we look in the mirror, to be proud of who we are, and what we've been able to go through. And I think there's a beauty in that. And I think too, like the dream of my dad was very interesting because I've had like a lot of like scary nightmares, but I also had scary like those types of emotions in waking life, right? Like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like I've been afraid, for my life in waking life. So like those dreams kind of mimicked things I've experienced. The dream of my father and that peace I felt and that love I felt within the imagery, never experienced in waking life. So
Wow.
in my mind, I'm like, well, that is kind of like, if I can experience in a dream that emotional state, why can't I experience in waking life? And so I think the hindrance of that is that lack of self-love for oneself. And so it kind of gives me almost a lighthouse on like where I am versus like what it could be. And it's a nice little goal to sort of have that it's possible, but you have to really like focus and do, I would say, do the work, to really like undo some of the trainings and the teachings that people have told you along the ways that told you that you were not enough. And so it's like that process, but there is a pathway forward. And I think that's the beauty of life, that if you understand that there's room to grow in an area, you can grow in that area, and just like understand that the world will find the right path for you to help you work untie some of those knots that have been tied through your upbringing and to the people around you, through life and our current climate of
Yeah.
where we're at. They're all tying knots within us, and it's like there's a way forward that we can untie those at the same time, so we can still value who we are in the world.
I love that. I love this idea and how you speak of it of like, if I can experience this much connection or transcendence or joy in a dream, maybe it is possible in real life. Like dreams having the potential to show you that, like, what you see in waking life is not all there is. Whether that has a spiritual connotation or an emotional one or a physical one or a mental one, that's really, really cool, and very profound. The last thing I want to ask you about is something that I love that you do on your podcast and on Instagram and on your website, and that is like collecting pop culture examples of dreams from TV shows, from movies, from all over the place. I saw you did the Sex and the City reboot called And Just Like That, had a grief dream in it, and so you collected that one. There's like grief dreams in Fiddler on the Roof. There's grief dreams in other major and minor films and TV, and it's really cool. And in music, the Beatles. I find myself in times of trouble. Mother Mary comes to me, presumably in a dream, and Paul McCartney talking about his dreams. Say more on your desire to find examples of grief dreams in the media, because it's something I've never seen anybody do it before, but because you do it now, I also do it. So I'll
Oh,
just be listening to songs or the radio or watching a show and be like, ah, grief dream. There it is.
there it
It's
is.
like
Yeah.
a grief dream I spy, but just like out in the world.
Yeah, honestly, it's not like I'm looking for them. Like I'm like, oh, here's a good movie. Maybe there's one in it. I think it just happens. And was really surprised when I was doing the research, just in general, on how often these dreams appeared in film and shows
Mm-hmm.
and in music, and how people talked about them in their creative arts, on like how impactful they were. And it was really interesting because one of my movies growing up as a child, there's a couple movies as like, remember I said I didn't realize you could have a dream, but one of my favorite films as a kid, Braveheart, had like three dreams that he had of a deceased wife. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. It was my dad's favorite movie. So that's why I watched it. But I'm like, so in the movie, it had these dream scenes that I wouldn't consciously recognize that was important. But now I realize, well, that was the whole point of his grief journey in the dream, to allow him to do what he did, was to have these sort of moments where it kind of saved him in different ways. And so I was like, wow, like how many other movies have I watched that I just, because I didn't know about the topic or felt it was important, they kind of just skipped over in my memory bank.
Mm-hmm.
But now it, like when it comes, I'm like, oh, this is cool, because I know like they're not looking at my research saying, oh, like, well, we should put one in because it's so common. What they're doing is they had probably their own dream experience that had been influential
Yeah.
to them, because the reality is most people after loss will have a dream of the deceased. I would say around 75, 80% of people. And so they're using their own experience to sort of put that in, to sort of highlight the dream in itself, the importance of that in the grief journey. And it's like their own creative way. And they can be negative dreams that they put in, or they have more positive dreams. But yeah, they're like everywhere. Like I remember Beauty and the Beast had one. Like the Beast had one with his dreaming of his deceased parents in like the Disney film, and
Oh, yes.
yeah,
One of
Slum.
my all-time favorites is Titanic, where she gets to
Okay,
go marry Jack on the boat at the very end of the movie. But there's so many other
there's so many.
sorts of grief dreams in TV and movies, and some
Yeah,
of them are very funny, like
yeah,
almost absurdist, and some of them have messages, and some
yeah.
of them are re-traumatizing, but kind of to your point to something that could offer a portal to asking different questions or a portal to healing. But like you're the only person I know who like publicly is collecting these.
Okay.
And it's just really cool. It's a Grief Dreams
Yeah,
collection. It's a library that keeps
yeah.
growing. So grief growers, as you're listening, if you can think of any grief dreams in music, movies, or television, please send them to Josh and he'll put them over on his website, griefdreams.ca. The collection just keeps going and
I
growing.
like it. Well, I just don't want to forget about them either. Because like that's the big thing too.
Yeah.
It's like just if I have them up there, I'll know like, oh, if I need to like reference something in the future, it's like it's there.
Yeah, it's an ever expanding library.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you so much for coming on and talking about grief dreams. Tell us, I know I just said your website, but tell us where people can find you, how they can listen to the Grief Dreams podcast, which is still alive and well. And I think I've been on 1 or 2 episodes over there. So
I want to.
listen
I
to my
think it was like
versions.
3. I think you had a couple update episodes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell people where they can find you and learn more about grief dreams as a topic.
Yeah. So I said griefdreams.ca. I'm on Instagram, where I post a lot of this stuff. That's where I'm most active on it. On Facebook, there's a Grief Dreams group where you can post your dreams and sort of like in a community. But more importantly, I said like the Grief Dreams podcast, where I bring guests on to talk about their grief and then how their dreams impact that in some way. There's over like 230 people that have come on to talk about their life and their journey with grief, and then also the dreams that they've had. And so if you're interested in these types of dreams or just want to like learn more about dreams, there's end of year episodes where I just clip the dreams of the people in the last year that have come on the podcast. So you can really see a gambit of how different these dreams truly are for people and how they understand them. Those are my favorite episodes because you get you really get to see sort of the gambit of what these dreams can be, because we have our own or may want one, but like there's so many different varieties out there and how they influence people and in their journey and where they are in their journey too. So, but yeah, so that's where you can find it. And thank you so much, Shelby, for having me on. I look forward to you coming on the podcast again to chat about your new book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll do another plug for Josh's work, but I wonder if listening to podcasts about grief dreams is another way to maybe make your brain give you some grief dreams if you want to have them. Thank you so much for coming on Grief Grower. It's been wonderful. That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so very much for joining me today to talk about grief dreams. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my signature What's Your Grief Support Style quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. And if you'd like to get support from me for your unique loss experience, I hope you'll join us in Life After Loss Academy, which is my online course and community. As a student, I will walk you through my 5-step grief method, GRIEF, for rebuilding life after loss, and you can get live coaching from me every single week to answer your questions. And replays are always available if you can't attend those calls live. If this podcast felt validating, comforting, educational, or otherwise helpful to you in your grief, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to share this show with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is dreaming about or going through. Grief Grower is hosted by me, Shelby Forsythia, and the theme music is composed by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, Grief Growers, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.